Ain't no way she's stepping on that floor, one cowboy muttered, loud enough for her to hear. The words cut through the fiddle music sharper than a whip, landing right in Mara's chest. She stood near the pine-trimmed post, hands folded tight, pretending the comment didn't sting, pretending she hadn't heard. But everyone knew she had. Folks always assumed the obese girl didn't feel much, like her size somehow made her skin thicker. Truth was, she felt everything. The lantern-lit barn glowed warm against the icy December night, but Mara still shivered. Snow drifted through the wide cracked door, settling on the floorboards like ash from a dying fire. Couples twirled beneath strings of red ribbons while boots thumped to the beat. Christmas at Braddock Ranch was supposed to feel magical. For most, it did. For her, it was another reminder that she didn't belong. She laughed softly at nothing, the way people do when they're trying to look unbothered. But that ache in her chest, that familiar ache, wouldn't let up. Like many of us, she carried scars no one could see, and tonight they felt heavier than usual. Another cowboy nudged his buddy. "Reckon anyone's fool enough to ask her to dance?" "Not unless the boss makes it a charity act," the other said, chuckling. Mara stared at the floorboards. She wished the music were louder so she wouldn't hear every cruel whisper. She wished she could disappear into the shadows. She wished this Christmas felt like Christmas. Across the room, Clay Braddock watched without blinking. Tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet enough to make men nervous. Clay had a stare that could pin a rattlesnake in place. He leaned against a beam, nursing black coffee instead of whiskey. His hat tipped just low enough to hide his eyes, but Mara still felt his gaze. She didn't know if that made her feel safer or exposed. When she looked up, he didn't look away. Her stomach twisted. Maybe he'd heard. Maybe he felt sorry for her. Maybe pity was worse than laughter. The music shifted to a slow tune, the kind made for soft steps and softer hearts. Folks headed to the floor in pairs, creating a swirl of denim and holiday lights. A cowboy near the snack table raised his voice. $10 says she ain't asked to dance before midnight." The group burst into laughter. Even the fiddle seemed to hesitate, as if embarrassed for them. Mara swallowed hard. She knew humiliation well, but Christmas cruelty had a special kind of bite. She grabbed her coat from the wall peg, fighting the urge to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She pushed through the barn door, icy air rushing into her lungs. Snowflakes gathered on her hair as she stepped into the yard. The cold should have hurt, but it felt easier than staying inside. She started walking toward the ranch gate, boots crunching in the snow. Maybe she'd slip away before anyone noticed she was gone. Behind her, the music dimmed as the door creaked open. "Mara," a deep voice called. She froze. That voice didn't belong to any of the cowboys. It carried too much command, too much calm, too much something she couldn't name. She turned halfway, heart pounding. Clay Braddock stepped out into the snow, lantern light catching the edge of his jaw. His expression didn't give away a thing, not even what he planned to say next. The barn behind him kept humming with laughter, but the night felt suddenly still, as if waiting. "Mara," he said again, but softer this time. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. And then she realized Clay Braddock wasn't just calling her name. He was walking straight toward her. Truth was, she'd grown good at disappearing, but tonight, the pain refused to stay quiet. Mara slipped behind the barn where the lantern glow faded and the cold bit sharper, hoping the darkness would swallow her whole. Out here, only the wind dared to look her in the eye. She'd learned young how to shrink herself, even when her body wouldn't. Growing up on the outskirts of a dusty Colorado town, she'd been the girl kids whispered about, the girl teachers pitied, The girl neighbors politely avoided. While other kids rode horses or raced down dirt roads, Mara stacked hay bales beside her father, pushing her weight into work because work was the only place she ever felt strong. But being strong didn't stop the insults, and growing older didn't stop the stares. Mara wrapped her coat tighter, breath curling into the cold. Like many of us, she carried scars no one saw, and she carried them alone except for the secret she'd never admit aloud, her crush on Clay Braddock. Clay with that slow stride and voice that could settle a wild colt. Clay who ran the ranch with quiet authority rather than fear. Clay whose rare smile felt like sunlight when it happened to land her way. She didn't love him. She wasn't foolish, but her heart had always leaned toward him, like a flower trying to reach warmth. She wanted to believe he saw her, even a little. But earlier tonight, when the Cowboys started in on her again, that hope cracked. Christmas hogs back, one had snickered as she passed, tossing a peanut in the air. Bet she eats half the dessert table before anyone gets a piece, another laughed. Mara kept walking, face blank, throat tight. She'd gotten good at looking unaffected, good at letting cruelty slide over her like rain on metal. But the truth, each word sank deeper than anyone knew. She could have handled one joke, maybe two. But then one cowboy leaned in loud enough for the whole barn to hear. You think Clay would ever dance with her? Well, the floor wouldn't hold up. Laughter roared. Even the fiddle seemed ashamed. Mara slipped out the back door the moment she could breathe again, boots carrying her to this shadowed patch of cold earth. She leaned against the barn wall, inhaling sharp winter air, trying not to cry. Crying never solved anything. Crying never helped her survive. But quitting might. She stared at the snow-covered pasture stretching toward the moonlit ridge. Maybe she'd walk away from this ranch, from these men, from this life. No one would miss her. Folks barely noticed her even when she stood right beside them. Inside the barn, Clay stood stiff near the punch bowl, jaw clenched. He'd heard the jokes. Hell, he'd been watching. Something hard flickered in his eyes. But he didn't step in, not yet. His silence carried weight, the kind that hinted at a storm building. Mara wiped her cheeks with the edge of her glove. I ain't staying here another day, she whispered to the dark. And just as the words left her lips, a shadow stepped into the light. Mara, why are you crying out here alone? He asked, voice low, a voice that could break a woman's guard. She stiffened instantly. Clay Braddock wasn't supposed to see her like this. Wasn't supposed to follow her into the dark. Wasn't supposed to sound like he cared. She turned her face away. Ain't crying, just needed air. Clay stepped closer, boots crunching in the snow, the cold breath of winter curling between them. You ain't gotta lie to me, he said gently. Not tonight. Mara's throat tightened. She tried brushing past him, but he shifted, blocking her path with nothing more than his presence. Clay, please, she whispered. Just let me go. No, he said, soft but firm. Not like this. The wind carried faint fiddle notes from the barn, each one a reminder of the laughter she'd escaped. Mara hugged her coat. You don't gotta pretend like you care, she muttered. Clay's jaw flexed. Who says I'm pretending? She didn't answer. She didn't believe him. People didn't care about her. They barely saw her. Clay exhaled deeply, breath clouding. I heard what they said, he admitted. Heard too much. Stood still too long. His voice roughened with regret. I should have shut it down right away. I didn't. And I'm sorry, Mara. She looked up then, surprised by the crack in his voice. Clay Braddock didn't apologize, at least not to his men, but regret sat heavy on his shoulders now, like he carried the weight of every word spoken in that barn. "It ain't your fault," she murmured. "They've always talked like that. That don't make it right." Clay took a step closer, the lantern glow from the barn door catching the worry in his eyes. "And it damn sure don't mean you gotta walk away from tonight like you ain't worth standing with." Mara felt her heart twist. She wasn't used to being defended. She wasn't used to men looking at her like she mattered. She shook her head. "Clay, whatever you're trying to do, don't. I can't take pity. Not tonight." His brows pulled together. "Pity?" he repeated, like the word offended him. "Mara, that ain't what this is." "Then what is it?" she challenged, voice cracking despite her efforts. Clay hesitated, breath steadying like a man preparing for a truth he hadn't planned to speak aloud. "Come back inside with me," he said quietly. I want the next dance." Her heart stopped cold. "Clay, don't," she whispered. "You don't gotta fix what they said. You don't have to make some grand gesture." "I ain't fixing anything," he replied. "I'm asking because I want to ask. Because I should have asked long before tonight." She stared at him, unable to breathe, mind spinning. This couldn't be real. Men like Clay didn't ask women like her to dance. Not in public. Not with everyone watching. Not with their reputations on the line. "You're just being kind," she said weakly. Clay shook his head. "I don't offer kindness. I don't mean." Silence fell heavy between them, filled with the shimmer of snow and the ache of possibility. Clay slowly extended his hand toward her, palm open, steady. Mara stared at Clay's outstretched hand, unsure if taking it would heal her or break her for good. When they stepped onto the floor, a cowboy choked on his drink and muttered, "Ain't no way the boss is serious." The words weren't subtle, and they weren't meant to be. Mara felt every eye turned toward her as if the whole barn had been waiting to watch her fall. Her breath came tight and thin, her palms cold even with Clay's warm hand wrapped around hers. Clay didn't hesitate. He didn't look embarrassed, didn't glance around for approval. He simply guided her forward, steady as a winter sunrise, like he'd decided long before now that this moment belonged to her. The fiddle wavered when they reached the center of the room, a hiccup in the music, a tremble of disbelief, but the player caught himself and kept going. The lanterns hanging from the rafters flickered over them, casting soft golden halos across the pine-trimmed walls. Snow had gathered in the corners where boots had dragged it in, melting into muddy slush. The air smelled of cedar, cinnamon, and the faint bite of whiskey. Mara felt 100 stares burning through her coat. She hadn't been this close to Clay before. She could feel the heat of his chest through his shirt, the firmness of his hand on her waist. She swallowed hard. "Clay, you don't gotta do this," she whispered, panic edging her words. "Not doing it for them," he murmured. "Doing it for you. Maybe a little for me." Her heart rattled like a loose stirrup. She didn't know how to dance with a man like him. Not under this many eyes. Not after so many insults. But Clay's hand tightened gently, grounding her. "Just breathe," he said. So she tried. The music softened into a slow rolling melody. Their boots shifted in time, the floorboards creaking beneath them. Clay led without force, without rush, as if he wanted her to feel every step, every beat, every breath. Mara let her eyes drift upward, cautious, uncertain, and found him watching her with something she couldn't name. That look alone weakened her knees. Whispers flickered around them like sparks. What the hell is the boss thinking? She must have tricked him. He's only doing it to prove a point. The humiliation echoed, familiar as an old bruise. But Clay's hand never faltered. He moved with her as though none of the chatter existed. as though she belonged in his arms and always had. The lantern glow washed over her, warm where the world was cold. For a moment, the laughter faded and the pine scent calmed her racing chest. She felt her breath steady, felt her shoulders loosen, felt her heartbeat finding the rhythm of the music. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Clay leaned closer. "There you go," he whispered. "Knew you had it in you." Her eyes blurred, but not from shame this time. Something in her cracked open, something gentle, something long buried. And as the music rose, so did the moment. If you've ever felt invisible like Mara, ride with us in true Western stories, where every heart finally gets its say. The words weren't spoken aloud in the barn, but they belonged to the emotion taking shape between them. The shift, the warmth, the quiet vow that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer her than cruelty. They finished a turn, Clay's thumb brushing her knuckles. Mara lifted her chin, breath trembling. She felt the weight of the room, the disbelief, the watching eyes, but for once, none of it drowned her. For once, she didn't shrink. Clay slowed their steps, gaze locked on hers like she mattered, like she wasn't a joke or a burden or the punchline of every whispered insult. For a heartbeat, the whole world stilled. And then, a sharp crack shattered the music. Someone slammed a glass down, hard enough to rattle the tables. The dance wasn't the end because someone had just stood up, ready to ruin everything. "Tell her, Hank," the drunk cowboy shouted. "Tell her why you really wanted the boss to dance with her." The room fell into an uneasy hush. The fiddle screeched to a stop, leaving only the crackling of the wood stove and the wet thump of Hank's boots as he staggered forward. Mara felt Clay's hand tense around hers, his posture sharpening like a blade drawn from its sheath. Hank wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve, smirking. His cheeks were flushed with whiskey, his eyes gleaming with the kind of cruelty drunk men wear proudly. "Go on," someone goaded. "Tell her the truth." Mara's heart slowed, then pounded hard enough to shake her ribs. She didn't want to hear this. Every instinct screamed for her to turn away, but she stood frozen, breath thin, waiting for the blow she could already feel coming. Hank spread his arms in a sloppy gesture. "Fine," he slurred. "You want to know why it's so damn funny the boss is waltzing around with you?" Clay's voice dropped low. "Dangerous. Hank, don't." But Hank didn't stop. He leaned forward, pointing directly at Mara. "Because I bet these boys $10 that Clay would take pity on you before the night was over." He snorted. Figured if anyone had danced with the Christmas hog, it'd be him. The words sliced through Mara like barbed wire. Laughter erupted from a few corners of the room, not loud, but sharp enough to hit hard. She staggered back, hand slipping from Clay's. Her vision blurred. Her throat burned. All the warmth she'd felt in Clay's arms vanished, replaced by a humiliating cold she knew too well. Clay's fist hit the table so hard the lanterns rattled. "You son of a..." He lunged toward Hank, voice shaking with fury. "You don't talk to her like that. You don't talk about anyone like that." Hank held up his palms mockingly. "Relax, boss. It was just a joke." Clay shoved him against the wall, breath hot with rage. "Then why ain't I laughing?" The room buzzed with tension. Some cowboys looked ashamed. Others stared at their boots. But Mara saw only the smirking faces that had always found entertainment in her pain. She backed toward the door, heart cracking open. Clay was yelling now, curses, threats, promises Hank wouldn't forget, but his voice felt far away, like it was coming through a tunnel. Whatever good she'd felt tonight, whatever sliver of hope Clay had given her, shattered under Hank's words. Like many of us, Mara knew exactly what it felt like to be treated as a joke. She burst through the barn door into the freezing night, gasping as snow slapped her cheeks. The darkness swallowed her quickly, her boots sinking into drifts as she half ran, half stumbled toward the open fields. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to get away from the laughter, the whispers, the pain. Behind her, Clay shouted her name, voice raw. "Mara, wait!" She didn't look back. She couldn't, because tonight had proved what she always feared. Kindness was temporary, but cruelty was forever. Clay cursed under his breath and ran after her, but she'd already vanished into the storm. The cold didn't hurt half as bad as the words replaying in her mind. Mara trudged through the open fields behind the ranch, snow rising past her ankles, the wind clawing at her coat like it wanted to drag her backward. Darkness stretched across the pasture, broken only by the faint glow of the barn lanterns far behind her. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself remembered her sorrow. She wrapped her arms around herself, breath coming in trembling bursts. How many times had she walked away from a room like that? How many nights had she swallowed the humiliation so deep it settled into her bones? Like many of us, she had grown so used to being unwanted that she almost expected cruelty to find her. Christmas had never been gentle to her. She remembered years where neighbors invited everyone but her family, remembered school parties where her gift was ignored, remembered the way kids always tugged their candy canes away when she came near, joking she'd eat everything in sight. Even as an adult, the season still pressed on old bruises that never fully healed. She sniffed hard, pushing down the ache. Clay's voice behind her in the barn had sounded furious, protective even, but Hank's words had drowned out every good thing Clay had said earlier. She'd told herself not to trust hope. Now she wished she'd listened. "I knew better," she whispered into the wind. "Should have known better." Back at the barn, Clay shoved through the back door with a lantern in hand. Snowflakes smacked his face as he scanned the fields, breath puffing in white bursts. Guilt gnawed at him like a starving wolf. He should have stopped the joke sooner. Should have warned Hank. Should have shielded her from all of it. Instead, he'd watched Mara break in front of him. "Mara," he called, voice tight with worry. The wind swallowed the sound. He pushed forward, boots sinking into the drifts. Lantern light bobbed in his hand, casting shaky gold circles across the frozen field. He wasn't just searching because he felt responsible, though he did. He wasn't searching because she was an employee, though she was. He was searching because the thought of losing her, even for a moment, tightened something painful inside his chest. Clay admired Mara more than any of his men realized. The way she worked harder than anyone without complaint. The way she treated every ranch hand with kindness, even when they didn't deserve it. The way her laugh, when she let herself laugh, softened the whole damn ranch for a heartbeat. He'd noticed her long before tonight. Noticed her strength, her patience, her heart. But he'd waited too long to show it. "Mara, please," he whispered into the dark, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Out in the field, Mara's steps slowed as she approached the creek that cut behind the property. Winter had frozen it into a pale sheet of ice, reflecting the weak glow of the distant barn lights. She didn't mean to get so close. Her thoughts were too loud, drowning out everything else. Her boot slipped once, just a small slide. She steadied herself, but the ground beneath her felt uneven. Shadows shifted under the snow, warning her too late that she'd wandered onto the shallow edge of the creek. "I just needed to breathe," she murmured, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to." Her foot slid again. She gasped, arms flailing as the snow gave way beneath her. And then she heard the ice crack, and then everything went silent. "Mara!" Clay roared, voice cracking a sound his men had never heard. The echo tore through the icy night as he sprinted toward the creek, lantern swinging wildly in his hand. Snow whipped at his face, but he didn't stop, didn't blink, didn't breathe until he saw the dark shape crumpled near the fractured edge of the ice. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Mara, God, Mara." His hands trembled as he brushed snow from her cheeks. Her eyes fluttered weakly, breath shallow, skin pale from the cold. She tried to push herself up, but her leg buckled instantly. "Don't move," he whispered, panic shoving the words out, rougher than he intended. "I got you." He slid his arms beneath her, lifting her gently but firmly. She winced, head resting against his chest. Clay held her tighter, heart pounding in unsteady thumps. He was strong, stronger than most men on the ranch, but right now, he felt breakable as glass. Mara forced her eyes open. "Clay, no, just leave me." "Not a damn chance," he snapped, voice shaking with emotion he couldn't hide. "I ain't ever leaving you out here." She tried to speak again, but exhaustion blurred her words. You don't gotta pretend. I know what I am." Clay's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "You don't know a damn thing," he said, breath warm against her hair. He shifted her weight in his arms, rising to his feet. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he turned toward the barn lights far in the distance. "You think I danced with you because I had to? Because they were watching? Mara, I've been drawn to you for months." She blinked foggily, not believing him, not able to. "You're lying. Don't do that. Not now." Clay shook his head fiercely. "I ain't good with words. Never have been. But I notice things. I notice you. The way you work harder than any man here. The way you smile even when folks don't deserve it. The way you make this place feel better." I should have said something sooner. Her lashes fluttered. "Clay." His name left her lips like a question she was afraid to ask. He pressed her closer as he trudged through the snowstorm. Each step felt heavy, like the land was fighting him. Wind tore at his coat, icy flakes stinging his eyes. But he didn't slow. Fear clawed at his chest, fear of losing her, fear of being too late, fear of his own silence. "Mara, listen to me," he murmured, voice unsteady. "I don't want you walking out of my life because some stupid cowboys said something cruel. I should have protected you sooner. Should have never let you feel alone among my crew." She breathed out a shaky laugh, dazed. "You're saying all this because I'm hurt." "I'm saying it because it's the truth." His voice broke raw. "And because I can't lose you tonight." As they drew closer to the barn, faint figures appeared at the entrance, a few ranch hands watching anxiously, shame written across their faces. They hadn't meant for things to go this far. Some wiped their eyes. Others muttered apologies under their breath. The snow reflected their regret like a mirror. But Clay didn't look at them. His whole world was the woman in his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath warming the fabric of his coat. "Clay," she whispered again, voice fading. "I'm right here," he promised. But when they reached the barn door, Clay realized the real fight hadn't even begun. Clay dropped Mara's name like a warning shot. "Make room now." His voice thundered through the barn as he kicked the door open, snow swirling in behind him. Every cowboy inside froze. Some stood, some backed away. The warmth of the lantern-lit space didn't touch Clay. Fury burned hotter than any stove. He carried Mara in his arms, her head limp against his shoulder. Her coat was dusted with snow, her hair tangled with ice. A murmur rippled through the room. Guilt, fear, shame all tangled into one uneasy hush. Clay laid her gently on a bench near the stove, his movements urgent but careful. Then he straightened, turning on the men who'd watched, laughed, whispered. "You see her?" he growled. "Look at what your damn words did." Several of the cowboys dropped their eyes. One stepped forward with a blanket, hands shaking. Another grabbed extra firewood, feeding the flames without being asked. A few whispered, "We're sorry, Mara," though she was too weak to hear. But Hank, he stood in the back, arms crossed, pride thick on his face. "Ain't my fault she ran out into the snow. She's the one who—" Clay was across the floor in 2 strides. He slammed Hank against the wall so hard the boards rattled. "You shut your mouth," Clay snarled, voice low and lethal. "You think I'm gonna let you talk about her like that? After what you pulled tonight?" Hank smirked, though fear flickered behind his eyes. "Come on, boss. It was just a bet. Ain't like I forced you to dance with her." Clay's fist tightened in Hank's collar. "You're done here." The room gasped. "You're fired," Clay said, the words cutting clean and final. "Get your things. Get off my land. And if you ever talk about her again, you and I are gonna have a different kind of reckoning." Hank opened his mouth to argue, but one look at Clay's eyes, cold as the creek, sharp as broken glass, silenced him. He shoved away, muttering curses, but no one followed. No one defended him. Even his drinking buddies stepped aside. Clay returned to Mara's side, kneeling. Her eyes fluttered weakly. She was pale, but breathing steadier now as the warmth seeped back into her body. One of the ranch hands brought her a cup of warm broth. Another draped a second blanket around her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, Mara wasn't invisible. She blinked slowly, focusing on Clay. "What happened?" "You slipped by the creek," he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Scared the life out of me." Some of the men hovered nearby, unsure if they should stay. Mara noticed them, the remorse in their eyes, the quiet apologies in the way they avoided looking directly at her. The humiliation still stung, but something had shifted. They weren't laughing anymore. They were learning. She swallowed, voice fragile. "Clay, earlier, before everything, why'd you ask me to dance?" The question hung between them, like smoke, warm and dangerous. Clay lowered his gaze for a heartbeat, breath catching. Then he met her eyes again, and Clay swallowed hard, because the truth was bigger than she knew. "Mara, I didn't ask you to dance out of pity. I asked because I ain't stopped thinking about you since June." The words landed softly, but they carried the weight of a thunderstorm. Mara stared at him, breath stuttering, heart trembling like a lantern flame in a draft. Clay didn't flinch. He held her gaze as if he'd been waiting months to say this, as if tonight had simply cracked him open. She swallowed hard. "Clay, don't say things you don't mean. Not when I'm like this." "I ain't saying it 'cause you're hurt," he replied, voice low and steady. "I'm saying it because it's the truth, and I should have told you long before Hank spat his poison." His hand hovered near her cheek, but didn't touch, like he feared breaking her. "You think I ain't noticed how you carry yourself? How you help anyone who needs it without asking for a thing? How you laugh when the world gives you every reason not to? Mara, you walk through this ranch with more grace than any woman I've ever met." Her eyes burned, tears pushed forward before she could stop them. You never said anything." Clay nodded, guilt flickering in his expression. "I didn't know how. Didn't know if saying something would make you uncomfortable or if folks would twist it. But that dance?" He exhaled. "I asked because it's been sitting on my heart for months." Mara pressed a shaky hand to her mouth. The pain from earlier, the humiliation, the cruel laughter, it cracked open something deeper. Something that had been waiting, aching, afraid. She tried to speak, but only a broken sob slipped out. Clay moved closer, finally letting his hand brush her cheek. "Hey," he whispered, "easy now. You ain't alone. She leaned into him without thinking. The warmth of his touch, the honesty in his voice, the steadiness of his presence, all of it wrapped around her like a blanket. She'd been cold without for far too long. She cried softly, and Clay held her hand, letting her break, letting her breathe. When she finally steadied, he asked gently, "Can you stand?" She nodded. Clay offered his arm, and she took it. Slowly, he guided her toward the open floor of the barn. The other cowboys stepped aside, giving space not out of fear now, but respect. Something had changed in them. Tonight had stripped arrogance from their eyes, leaving only the truth. They had been wrong. Clay stopped beneath the dimmest lantern, its light soft and golden on the worn boards. "Not for show this time," he murmured. "Not for them." He extended his hand again this time, tender, quiet, sacred. "For us." Mara hesitated, overwhelmed, breath trembling. "Clay, I don't look like the women you usually dance with." He stepped closer. "Good," he said. "I don't want anyone else." Something inside her loosened. Something old, something wounded. Something that had always whispered she wasn't enough. Clay's voice smoothed the scars like balm. She placed her hand in his, and Clay pulled her close, slow and deliberate. They began to sway. No music, no audience, no drunken jeers. Just the sound of wind pushing snow against the barn walls. Just the creak of floorboards. Just Clay's heartbeat pulsing through her fingertips. The ranch hands watched from a distance, not mocking, not whispering. Some wiped their eyes. Others nodded slowly, almost reverently. It wasn't just Mara changing tonight. The whole ranch learned something about dignity, courage, and the cost of cruelty. Clay lowered his forehead to hers. "I'm here," he whispered. A breath escaped her like relief. She let her head rest against his chest. For the first time in her life, she wasn't shrinking. She wasn't apologizing for her body, her presence, her worth. She was loved, or at least on the edge of being loved, and it felt like stepping into sunlight after years of winter. If moments like this heal something in you, come ride with us again in true Western stories where broken hearts find their roads home. Snow continued drifting through the cracks in the old barn walls, falling gently around them like blessing. But just as Mara began to believe this night might end in peace, she lifted her eyes to Clay and whispered a final trembling question, and Clay stiffened, because Mara had one more question, a question that would change everything. "Clay, what happens when the music stops?" Mara asked. Her voice trembled, not with fear this time, but with the fragile hope of someone who's tasted kindness and is terrified it might vanish with the dawn. The barn had gone quiet around them, cowboys holding their breath as snow whispered against the old wooden walls. Clay cupped her cheek gently, thumb brushing away a tear that hadn't yet fallen. "When the music stops," he said softly, "we keep walking. Together. Ain't no song in the world strong enough to stop what I feel for you." Mara's breath caught. She'd never been someone's for. Never imagined she'd hear words like that spoken in a voice roughened by wind, work, and sincerity. She looked down, overwhelmed. "Together," she echoed, unsure if she deserved it, unsure if she could trust it, but wanting to. A cough broke the silence. It came from one of the ranch hands, the youngest, hat in hand, guilt weighing down his shoulders. "Mara," he said quietly, we owe you more than an apology. We were cowards tonight, and cruel." Another stepped forward, voice cracking. "We should have stopped Hank, should have stood up for you. You work harder than any of us, and we treated you like you didn't matter." A chorus of murmured assent followed. Boots scuffed the floor, eyes lowered. For the first time, Mara felt the sincerity in their voices rather than the sting of their judgment. She swallowed. "Thank you," she whispered. I never wanted to be a joke." "You ain't," one said firmly. "Not anymore. Not ever again." Clay looked around the room, jaw set. "Things change on this ranch tonight. Respect won't be optional. Not toward her. Not toward anyone." The Cowboys nodded, and Mara, for the first time in her life, didn't shrink from the attention. She straightened, breath steadying, heart opening to a new possibility. She'd never dared imagine a life where she wasn't invisible. Clay took her hand again, slow and deliberate. "One more dance?" he asked. Voice dipped low, rich with meaning. Mara blinked. "With everyone watching?" "They ain't watching to judge this time," he said. "They're watching to learn." She hesitated, but Clay's hand was warm. His eyes sure, so she let him guide her to the center of the barn. The lanterns flickered above them, beams creaking softly as though blessing the moment. Snow drifted through the gaps in the walls, dusting the floor in a glittering sheen. Clay nodded to the fiddle player, a quiet signal. The musician lifted his bow, and a gentle tune rose into the air, soft as a prayer, deep as winter night. Mara took her first step, soft, slow, sacred. The ranch hands watched in silence, not mocking, not whispering, but witnessing a woman reclaiming her spirit. Mara's humiliation began dissolving, melting like ice under sunrise. Every turn brought warmth back into her bones. Every breath carried a truth she'd never let herself believe. She was worth this. She always had been. Clay held her like she was something precious, not fragile, a woman of strength, dignity, and heart. He leaned close. "You got no idea how long I've wanted to dance with you." She smiled, small, astonished, real. "You could have asked sooner." Clay chuckled softly. "Reckon I'm learning, too." The music wrapped around them, gentle as snowfall. The barn glowed warm, and the night hummed with something magical, something earned. Mara felt it settle inside her. Peace, belonging, a quiet kind of triumph. This wasn't a charity dance. This wasn't pity. This wasn't spectacle. This was a promise, a new beginning, a truth that finally found breath. As the music swelled, Clay spun her slowly beneath the lantern light. The Cowboys clapped softly, some smiling, some wiping their eyes. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, listening to the moment unfold. Mara lifted her chin, heart overflowing, pain slowly turning into something else, something strong. She'd walked through storms alone, carried wounds no one saw, endured laughter meant to break her. But now she stood in the center of the room, dancing with a man who saw everything she was and wanted her still. This was the redemption her heart had been waiting for. And as the fiddle's last note faded into quiet, the warmth of Clay's hand in hers didn't. This was one of many true Western stories. If it stirred your heart, saddle up with us for the next ride. Outside, snow drifted gently across the fields, laying a white blanket over the wounds of the night, softening everything it touched. And that Christmas night, Mara finally danced not because she was chosen, but because she chose herself.